So, good morning, everyone. This is Tony Lantafame, Security and Compliance Specialist for Microsoft. We've got Leo Ramirez, who's going to present Microsoft Information Protection today, provide an overview. Probably be about 45 minutes. We're going to save some time at the end for verbal questions. If you do have any questions in the during the presentation, feel free to put them into the chat window, and I'll hand it over to Leo.
All right, thank you, Tony. Again, my name is Leo Ramirez, and I'm a compliance lead on the pre-sales team here at Microsoft. And I'm working with customers in the state and local government, and I cover the east side of the United States. And today's topic for the webinar is Microsoft Information Protection, or MIP for short. I'm excited to share with you the capabilities of MIP and how you can use it to secure your sensitive data and prevent it from getting in the wrong hands. Microsoft Information Protection is one of my favorite compliance solutions, simply because it's so robust, it's easy to use, and it's native to the Microsoft platform. As Tony mentioned, if you have any questions, we have some great people in the chat that can answer those questions. But if we have time afterwards, please feel free to come off mute and we can discuss your questions. We're going to get into the presentation and then we'll dive into a demo. Right? Now, I wanted to start with this slide to show you some recent statistics when it comes to data breaches and data loss. What we're seeing on this slide are results from a study that was done in 2021. Talking about the financial impact that data breaches can have for any organization. On an average, it's costing almost $4 million when a data breach occurs. And it's estimated that per compromised customer, it costs $175. And intellectual property losses nationally has cost $600 billion. Now, let's talk about the same issue and how it hits closer to home in the government space. These are some excerpts from a recent article that was published in August of 2021, but still very timely and relevant for those in the public sector. Let's take a look at the title. Why government institutions are the perfect target for hackers. In this part of the article, some of the reasons are because government agencies and institutions house highly sensitive information. The government is the intersection of many different industries. And then, as many of you probably are well aware, the IT and security teams, they're faced with a do more with less challenge. And of course, state and local agencies are typically less funded. Now, here's a snip from the last paragraph of the same article that speaks on what a solution looks like. It says, find a solution that secures all possible avenues of entry for a hacker and one that meets compliance requirements. I'm not showing you this article to scare you. I'm just probably reinforcing something you already know. And throughout this presentation, you're going to see how Microsoft Information Protection can help. All right, these are the big concerns that I'm hearing when I talk to CISOs, risk officers, data protection or information governance officers. They're saying these are the top priorities they're sharing with me when it comes to protecting sensitive information. They're saying they need to understand what kinds of sensitive data they have, where that data resides. Is it in the cloud? Is it on-prem? Is it in email? Or a third-party application or third-party repository. And then the most recent concern is, how are they protecting that data with the new normal, people working from home? So if Andy, Ellen, and Diana can address these concerns, the battle for protecting their sensitive information is already won. All right, now let's get into the good stuff. I like this slide because it shows all of the capabilities for Microsoft information protection on a single slide. And as you see, MIP is not just a single solution. It contains multiple solutions that are part of the MIP framework. And we're going to see most of these solutions in action in the demo. Now, the heart of MIP is the data classification service. And this is what's used to identify, classify, and protect sensitive information in combination with these other solutions. Sensitive information types, these are identifiers, and they're built off of patterns, functions, and keywords to identify things like social security numbers, credit card numbers, maybe driver's license. We have over 200 built-in sensitive information types, but customers can also create their own sensitive information types to do things like exact data match or trainable classifiers. And what exact data match is it allows you to take millions of pieces of exact data like social security numbers or credit card numbers and use these as identifiers in information protection or data loss prevention policies. And the source table for exact data match, it can be refreshed dynamically, and it can have over 100 million, up to 100 million rows of data. Trainable classifiers, that's a method used to classify and identify an item based on what it is, not by the elements that are within the content. And it's very useful for protecting things like source code, resumes, agreements, or contracts. So now, once you know what you're looking for and you have identified the sensitive information types that you have in your organization, you can use sensitivity labels. And we're going to go deeper into what sensitivity labels can do in the demo. All right, so let's start in Office 365. This is where you can use information protection policies and data loss prevention policies to protect sensitive information in SharePoint, Teams, Exchange, and OneDrive. We also have endpoint DLP as part of the MIP framework. And this can help prevent data loss on the Windows 10 or Windows 11 endpoint, or most recently Mac OS, to prevent things like uploading sensitive information to the cloud or to certain applications, prevent data loss on USB drives or network drives, even copying sensitive information to the clipboard. One of the key advantages of Microsoft Endpoint DLP is does not require an agent, right? It's cloud delivered and cloud managed. Moving up, the MIP solutions are consistent across platforms, Windows, Mac OS, iOS, or Android. Same experience on each of these platforms. Moving over to the Defender for Cloud Apps, this is what used to be called MCAS. This is the CASB, where you can identify, it can be used to identify, protect, and classify sensitive information in third-party clouds like Google or Dropbox. The Azure Information Protection Scanner is a solution which can be used to identify, protect, and classify sensitive information on-premise, like file shares, or if you're using SharePoint on-prem. And then our Azure Purview solution that's new helps protect sensitive information and structured sources like databases or blob storage or Azure files. All right. And also, I mentioned earlier that Microsoft Information Protection is native, so it can extend to other compliance solutions that we have, like advanced e-discovery and insider risk management, as well as communication compliance. All right, I know that's a lot to cover, but we're going to see more in the demo. All right, but before we get into the demo, let's meet Kelly. Kelly she's known for being a hard worker. She often works from home. She works in the finance department. She has no malicious intent when handling sensitive information. She works with credit cards, social security numbers, and other types. But she works for a state agency that does not have protections in place for sensitive data. Let's see what happens with Kelly, what Kelly can do because she doesn't have protections in place. Kelly's working in this file that has social security numbers. This file has no protections. We know because there's no lock icon over here on the bottom. Kelly can actually copy this sensitive information, open her email. Because she works from home, Kelly wants to validate, she wants to validate these later when she goes home to make sure that these are all legitimate social security numbers. So she sends this to her personal email address on Gmail for her homework. Hits the send button. That's going to land in her Gmail, and there's no blocks in place, no protections. That's one of the things that she can do. Kelly can also, if she's chatting with, maybe she's chatting with her daughter regarding, I don't know, she needs a phone number. Kelly accidentally, instead of copying and pasting a phone number that she's typed in this file, she accidentally copies a social security number in Teams. Does that? This message gets to the external user, which happens to be her daughter that works in another agency, without being blocked. These are just a small example of some of the things. They seem like little things, and they're unintentional, but they can cost big for an organization. Now let's go to the Compliance Center and see what we can do to start protecting data. So you can get to Compliance Center by going to compliance.microsoft.com. And a good place to start for Microsoft Information Protection is the data classification section. This is where Andy, Ellen, and Diana can address their concerns. What's top of mind to them, protecting where that sensitive data is, learning what kinds of sensitive data they have. Going back to the Compliance Center, on the overview page, we see a snapshot of the type of top sensitive information types that are being identified in Microsoft 365. Right here, one of the top sensitive information types is social security numbers. Moving over, we can also get a snapshot of the top sensitivity labels that are being applied to content. This part comes after you've already published sensitivity label policies. So we can actually learn more by clicking on this link. We can see that users are applying those sensitivity labels in locations like SharePoint, OneDrive, and Exchange. We can also see that the circular graph gives us a visual of where those sensitivity labels are. Looks like most of them are in Exchange. We have some in OneDrive and also in SharePoint. Coming over here, I get some insights on Azure Information Protection. This is referring to that AIP scanner that we saw earlier in this slide. This is the on-prem sources. So if an organization deploys the Azure Information Protection Scanner, those insights filter into the data classification portal. So we can see that labels are being applied there. And if we click on this link, this is going to bring us to the Azure Information Protection portal where we can get even more details and insights on what's being identified in those on-prem repositories. we're going to come over to the sensitive information types. I mentioned that Microsoft has over 200 built in, but you can create your own. These are where those patterns and functions for identifying things like credit card numbers or social security numbers. This is what's being used to identify sensitive information. I'm going to click on US social security number. One of the neat things about the sensitive information types is you can actually test them and copy them. So if this one doesn't meet your need for a particular reason, you need to make an adjustment, you can copy it and then modify it. But you can test it by uploading social security numbers to validate that it's actually working the way you need it to work in your organization. So I'm going to test this one. Bam. So I see these are definitely social security numbers, and I can validate that they're working the way I need them to. Moving over to the exact data match, the exact data matches section that we discussed earlier. This is where you can configure the schema and begin the process of creating the exact data match identifier. And then you can also, once you create it, you create a sensitive information type, and then you can test that as well. Now, if you have G5, a version of the G5 or E5 licensing, you're going to see the Content Explorer and Activity Explorer tabs. What these tabs, they give you more visibility into some of the things you saw on the overview page. You can get a count of the sensitive information types that are being detected in your environment. For example, there's over 11,000 social security numbers that are being detected. And these are in Exchange, OneDrive, SharePoint, and Teams. With the right permissions, you can actually drill in and get more details to validate. I see that I have, in this particular SharePoint side, I have 7 files that contain sensitive social security numbers. So I can drill in further and validate. If I wanted to click in here, I can see the source, the native file, and I can definitely validate that those are social security numbers. Click on more details. Same thing for sensitivity labels that we're going to talk about in more detail in a little bit. I can see where those are being applied throughout my organization. The Activity Explorer page, this is going to show all activities related to sensitivity labels and data loss prevention policies. And you can filter and see activities like rules that are being matched, files that are being discovered for endpoint DLP. You can see if files are being copied to the cloud, files are being printed, tons of information you can use to further triage some of those activities. All right. Last week, if some of you guys were on the call, we discussed Compliance Manager. And this could be a next step to learn more details about what you can do to protect the sensitive information that you've already detected in data classification. If you scroll down and go to the Protect Information section, you can simply click on View Improvement Actions and see all of the actions you could put in place for protecting your sensitive information. For example, the first one is Implement Information Rights Management System for email. Clicking on this improvement action, you're going to get details on how to implement that particular solution. Right, but we're going to come back over to the information protection solution. Information protection solution. This is step 2. Let's consider this step 2. You've already identified where the sensitive information is. Now it's time to start doing something about it. Right on the overview page, there's guidance built in to the portal, how to get started, explore information protection in DLP to meet your compliance goals. Clicking on labels, this is the area where you would create a sensitivity label. And you can create sensitivity labels based on your classification, data classification strategy. For example, and by the way, this is empty by default. I created all of these, and I'm saying that because customers typically ask, "What's in there?" Right, to get you started. It's blank. So I created a label for personal to classify personal data, public data. This is a label that can be used to classify content that's free to share publicly. General label, that's used for general business files or general business content, and it can include things that they're business content, but it doesn't require protection settings. And then we have other labels like this internal confidential label that requires protection settings. And if we look at the details, we see that this is for internal use only. And I've actually created a watermark that puts a watermark across the content, letting users and recipients know that this is for internal. Let's edit it to get more details. So create the label, you decide what you want to name it. You can put a description for users and a description for admins. This description for users actually shows up when users, I'll show you during the demo, when users hover over the label, the sensitivity label icon, this description will come up. The label can be scoped to files and emails. It can also be scoped to groups, Microsoft 365 groups, and containers like SharePoint sites. Can also be scoped to Azure Purview, which are structured data sources like SQL or Synapse or Azure Blob files. Clicking next, this is where we can decide whether we want to place encryption settings or watermarkings, headers and footers on the content. Also, clicking next, we can decide how permissions are applied. The admin, which in this case is me, I can either assign the permissions now or users can assign the permissions. There's an option to allow users to assign the permissions on the content. Also, there's an option for whether or not you want to the content to expire. The default is never, but you can set it to expire on a specific date or a number of days after the label is applied, and whether or not to allow offline access. This is where you assign permissions, and permissions can be scoped to users and groups, authenticated users. You can even add specific groups or users. We can choose even further permissions like co-author, that's the default. But say we don't want to allow users to be able to save, print, edit content, forward. If it's an email, reply all. Those are all permissions that can be applied to the label and then applied to the content. Now, this is probably a lot, so I want to show you on a slide of what a label is capable of. The labels, they're customizable. They persist with the content or the container. Wherever that file goes, the label goes with it. They can be applied manually by the user, or they can be applied automatically by the system. I'll show you in a minute what the benefit is for automatic. They, again, apply to a container, and they can be applied to data at rest, data in use, or data in transit. Just wanted to help get this concept better explained for you. Coming back. So once you've created your label, your classification strategy, how you want to protect your content, the next step is label policies. So we'll edit this one just to show you. So you'll decide through your policy, you make the decision of which labels you want to make available to your users. Here I selected public, general, internal, confidential, highly confidential, and HIPAA sensitive. Click next. This is where I can scope this policy to the specific users or groups. And you can just select all. You can select your entire organization if that's what you want to do in your agency. Click next. Here we can configure other settings like require user to provide justification if they remove a label or lowers classification. You can even require users to apply a label. Default label. This is good for many organizations, including us at Microsoft. We have a default label that gets applied to everything, all content. And this is good for tracking your content. And you can select based on the ones you've chose in step 1. Same thing for emails. And it also applies to groups and sites if you want it to. All right. So I mentioned automatic labeling and manual labeling. Manual labeling is done by the user. Automatic labeling is something you can configure if you have an advanced SKU, like something more than G3. So you can actually configure a simulation before you apply the label. Here, I've configured a simulation to identify anything that has HIPAA-related content in SharePoint. Let's click on this one. The benefit of doing this is that it doesn't get applied automatically. You have to test it first. You have to do a simulation. So here I found the simulation has found 5 matches. I can actually go in here and review. I can look at this content, verify that it's working. It's going to show me the source. Yep. Again, these are social security numbers. I validate. If I'm happy with this, I can turn it on right away. Or I can continue to do the simulation and even further modify the policy. Now, here are the benefits for automatic labeling. You don't have to train the users on when to use classifications. You know, this is all based on what you create the policy to do. You say, I want it to go out there and find anything related to credit card numbers, automatically put a label on that so that it's protected even if the file leaves my agency. You don't have to rely on users to do this correctly. Users don't even have to know about these policies. They can just focus on their work. And the labeling is done by the service rather than the application. So no need to worry about what applications users have or what versions. And its service is immediately available throughout the organization and suitable for labeling at scale. So definitely worth considering, especially if you have a large organization. All right. We've talked about information protection, labeling. Now let's talk about data loss prevention. And you can find that solution just on the left side of the menu. Again, when you get to the overview page, tons of resources about data loss prevention. Step 1 is creating a policy. And you can create policies. Actually, let's see what the options are. You can get started right away with a template, or you can create a custom template. And we have templates for financial, medical and health, and privacy, or you can create a custom. If I were to choose medical and health, I can create a policy that has that's going to protect information related to HIPAA, like PII identifiers or medical terms. But let's edit one that I've already created. Let's go to this one right here. This one protects sensitive information that's that's attempting to be shared in email. All right. I give it a description. Here we can choose the location. In this policy, I chose exchange email, and then you can scope it to different groups. You can also exclude certain groups. There's also option for SharePoint, and you can choose either all sites or specific sites. Same thing for OneDrive. Now, this is what's included for G3 customers. If you have an advanced SKU, from here down, there are options. DLP for Teams chat and channel messages, devices. This is covering endpoint DLP that I discussed earlier. And then we also have an option for Defender for cloud apps and on-premise repositories. And then Power BI. Right? I'm going to go back to the original email to show you what the options are when you create a rule. So creating a rule, I'm going to edit this one. We can select the identifiers, the sensitive information types that we want to detect, the instant count. Maybe you're not concerned if there's between 1 and 5 instances of a social security numbers. That's okay. But if you have concerns, you can modify this the way you want. We come down here, when content is shared with outside of my organization, this is what's going to trigger the policy along with this condition. Exceptions can be created. For example, I don't have an exception on this one, but the action for me in this rule is I'm going to encrypt the content if this is found in the email. But I also want this to be forwarded to my manager, to the manager, so that the manager can approve whether or not this goes out or not. That's not a requirement, that's an option. One of the additional options to show you that this is very scalable. It can be configured in different ways. Policy tips can be configured. You can also decide whether or not you want incident reports to be emailed to the admins. And maybe you don't want the report or the alert to show when there's less than X amount of instances. This is so you don't want to flood the admin, right? You can decide whether or not you want certain details to be in the report, like the name of the person who modified the content, the type of sensitive content that matches the rule, or the severity level, or even you can even include the item in the email that actually match the rule. All right. I'm just going to click end. And now we're going to meet Grady. Grady, he's a user. He works in the legal department, handles a lot of HIPAA data. Grady's a fast worker, but he doesn't always pay attention to security policy. But the good thing is, notice this, he works for an agency that does have protections in place when it comes to sensitive information. Let's visit Grady's workstation to see what he can and cannot do. All right, let's start off with email. Grady, you know, he also tends to work from home, and he wants to send some social security numbers home so that he can validate those and do some work later. So he copies some social security numbers to an email and he sends it to his Gmail account. Homework. Let's see the workflow after we hit send. All right. Grady's shortly going to get an email letting him know you can't do this. This has to be sent to an admin for approval before it's going to reach the sender. You can see that I've done this previously. Here's that email. It says homework. This contains HIPAA data and has to be sent to an admin before reaching the sender. The admin is his manager. Manager's name is Nestor. So let's open Nestor's email and see what happens. Approve requested for homework. Now, his managers can either approve or reject it. If he approves it, this email is going to go to Grady's Gmail. Right? If he denies it, obviously it's not going to go. So let's see what happens when it goes to Grady's Gmail account. And this is all happening because there are DLP policies in place that protect sensitive information from being shared externally. So here's that email for homework, but wait, I don't see the content. Grady doesn't see the content. If he clicks on read message, he's prompted to either sign in or get a one-time passcode. If he clicks on one-time passcode, he goes back to his Gmail account, gets that one-time passcode, and let's see what happens then. Copies and paste. In there, continues. Now he can see his homework. But wait, he's not in Gmail. He's in Outlook.Office 365. This is showing us that this email is encrypted, but it never goes to his Gmail. He's redirected to Office 365. Again, this policy is working the way we want it to. Another thing that Grady cannot do is, because we have protections in place, if he goes to SharePoint and tries to share a sensitive file with that same Gmail account, he's going to be prompted that he can't do this. Bam, it says item contains sensitive information and it can't be shared with people outside the organization. Grady's like, why? I did this before, I did it from Outlook, but if he clicks on the policy tip that's also part of the policy, it says, please be advised, this content is prohibited from being shared externally. It cannot be shared with people outside your organization. This is educating Grady in case he hasn't done his compliance training regarding the security policy. Let's see what Grady's persistent. So he's going to try some other things. Okay, so I can't share that on OneDrive. Let me see if I can copy these social security numbers from one application to another. Right? I'm going to copy them from Word and see if I can copy them to Notepad. Well, because the organization has endpoint data loss prevention policies configured to prevent this type of action, that's another thing that Grady cannot do. Right? Grady says, oh, okay, let me try to print this thing. Very persistent. Again, cannot do this. Action is blocked because that's part of the endpoint DLP policy. This action is prevented. Now, if Grady tries to copy, excuse me, the same file to a shared drive, and that's a prevented action, he's going to get that same prompt. All right. Now, if we go to Teams and Grady says, hey, well, I'm going to send a social security number to my guy over there. This is a partner, who knows? But anyway, he's not supposed to do that. he tries to share that over Teams, he's going to get a pop-up letting him know that this is also a prevented actions, all because they have configured, the admin has configured Teams DLP policy. Right? So we're seeing how all of these solutions work together, all from one portal. Teams DLP, endpoint DLP. Oh, one thing I did not show you yet when it comes to the labeling. This is what manual labeling looks like. Let me get rid of this. So when you have sensitivity labels published, this is the built-in sensitivity icon, the unified labeling icon that's built into Office applications. And here we can see the label hierarchy. We can see public, general, internal, confidential. Remember when I said the description, when you hover over the label, you see what the label is used for. If you configure that, this lets the user know this is confidential and only internal people have access to read or modify this file. So if I select that, we see that it has the protection, the lock comes up at the bottom. And if anything that Grady puts in this file is going to be protected. So whether he shares this externally, internally, number one, only internal users are going to be able to open the file. And even if it does get sent externally, this label, it stays with the file no matter where it goes. It's kind of like a stamp, a tag that you put on an envelope. Wherever that envelope goes, the stamp's going to go with it. It becomes part of the metadata. Right? So, in conclusion, we're seeing that Microsoft's built-in data protection capabilities can help government customers natively enforce not only DLP controls, but also labeling controls. And these are all built into the service layer. And this provides a better performance and a simplified management experience. Microsoft's holistic approach for data protection enables customers like you to seamlessly extend the value of your investments for other compliance solutions like insider risk management and communication compliance. And in fact, that's the topic of the webinar for next week. I hope you found today's session useful, interesting, and learned some things that you can put to use right away. As you can see, MIP satisfies tons of use cases, and I hope you'll start using it soon to protect your sensitive information. Please follow up with me, Tony, or your account team if you have questions about Microsoft information protection or data loss prevention. Let us know if you're interested in doing a trial for some of the advanced features that you currently do not have licenses for, like Teams DLP, endpoint DLP, or automatic labeling. And we'll be sure to get you connected with the right team for anything we cannot help you with. Now, I see we have a few minutes left. Are there any questions in the chat?
No questions in the chat.
Anybody want to come off mute and ask a question?
So Leo, I'll start with a question. So in your former life, you worked for the Fasttrack Center. You showed in the portal how how there's like some guidance, but what can the Fasttrack Center do to help customers that already own these products?
Yeah, the Fasttrack team can actually give you deployment guidance. So all of the solutions I showed you, if you're licensed with E3, G3, or G5, they can help you right away get started with information protection and data loss prevention. So, for example, if you need help with your data loss prevention policies, you have intent to deploy this service, and you qualify, meaning you have 150 licenses of G3 or G5 or more, You can get adoption support. Now, they don't do hands-on, but they will help your team deploy these services. And like Tony mentioned, that's something I used to do, help customers deploy compliance solutions.
Okay, any other questions? Yeah, feel free to come off mute.
Yeah, this is Balrup. I have a quick question. I'm working on DLP side and enable HIPAA policy, and I was testing it, and a lot of false positives going out. If there is any medical term in PDF, it flags it as violation. So I'm trying to see how can I avoid that? What is the best way to test those policies? So I disabled it right now. Trying to see how can I accomplish that. If there's any link or anything.
Yeah, so if you're using, are you using one of the default templates?
Yes.
Okay, so you're in a good situation to use a custom sensitive information type. So
Okay.
you can create a custom sensitive information type. I'm just gonna call this medical 1. Give it a description. And then here you can create a pattern that better matches those medical terms that you're looking for. So you can create either a regular expression, maybe there's a keyword list. You can use a keyword dictionary or even a function. And then you can decide on the character proximity. A lot of times it's the character proximity that creates some of those false positives. And then whether or not there's supporting elements like a keyword or another regular expression. And again, you can copy, let's see, ICD. If it's ICD.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing it on, yeah.
Yeah, you can copy that one and create, is this a copy? Right, for some reason this one, it's grayed out, but you should be able to copy this. My demo tenant's been through a lot, so, but copy it and modify it in a better way that meets your needs.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I was trying to avoid, that people will send PDF that has medical term in it and it shouldn't flag it. Okay. Thank you.
And then, Don, I see you have a question. How could end users, yep, thank you, Bibi, for adding that link. How could end users use labels, identify terms, include or exclude from FOIA PRA records? Again, that's a scenario where you can create a sensitive information type that has those particular keywords that you might be interested in detecting, and then apply those with sensitivity labels if necessary. And during our demonstration for advanced e-discovery in a few weeks, we're going to learn how you can search for sensitive information types that Don may be referring to, or sensitivity labels. Any more questions?
Doesn't look like it. So, so thanks, Leo. You really brought the information protection to life today with your personas and the demo. So a great job, and thanks to all the attendees. And the sessions are recorded. They're posted up into our YouTube channel, so, which is in the was disclosed in the chat window. So hopefully you can make it next week for our next session. So have a good day. Thank you.
Take care, everyone.